Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world that feels familiar only in the way a dream does. Recognizable shapes, strange textures, and a sudden, disorienting sense that you've forgotten something important. You find yourself standing just outside the city of Rome, the early morning light spilling over a landscape that doesn't quite match the postcards. Instead of marble brilliance, there's dust hanging in the air, clattering cartwheels, and a steady hum of voices weaving into a tapestry of noise you're not even close to ready for. And yes, within about 30 seconds, you realize you probably won't survive this.
So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Always love seeing how far these little bedtime journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself stepping into Rome at the height of its power. Except the moment your sandal-less modern feet hit the uneven ground, you already regret everything. The air is thick, not just with dust, but with a kind of busy warmth that sticks to your face. People surge around you in currents that make modern rush hour crowds feel like gentle puddles. You're hoping this is the idyllic Rome of poets, but the reality you're standing in feels closer to being dropped into a bustling street market without a map or even a phrase book. A man shoves past you without breaking stride, muttering something about being late for the forum. Another walks by carrying a giant clay jar on his shoulder, balanced like it's nothing. You try to step aside and nearly collide with a goat. Why is there a goat? No one knows. The goat probably doesn't know. It just bleats at you like you're the weird one. You're trying your best to blend in, but historians still argue whether even a perfectly dressed outsider could ever truly pass for a local here. You, unfortunately, are not perfectly dressed. You look like time accidentally sneezed you into the wrong century. A vendor calls out from a wooden stall, offering what he claims is the best bread in Rome. You glance at it. The loaf looks solid, structurally sound, possibly a building material. You nod politely and keep moving before he tries to make you buy it, because you don't have a single denarius in your pocket and no idea whether modern, "Hey, sorry, I don't have cash" excuses work here. Spoiler, they don't. Romans love cash. They invented complaining about cash. You continue forward, feeling the heat building even though the sun hasn't fully risen. Rome runs on a pace that makes your usual mornings look leisurely. You can almost feel the empire waking up under your feet. Blacksmiths heating their forges, bakers pulling tough-looking bread from ovens, senators being carried past in litters while pretending they're extremely important. One of them sneaks a yawn. A soft breeze drifts by, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of life. Lots of life. Maybe too much life. If you've ever wondered what it would smell like to cram 1,000,000 people, thousands of animals, open kitchens, and not-so-open sewer systems into one city, congratulations, your nose is now fully informed. Don't worry, you get used to it. Kind of. Eventually. Probably. One mainstream fact about Rome immediately hits you. This place is loud. The clamor of iron tools, market vendors shouting prices, orators practicing speeches, and the rhythmic stomp of soldiers on patrol. It's all happening at once, a constant urban orchestra that doesn't care that you just rolled in from the quiet comfort of the 21st century. Romans reportedly debated whether noise was a sign of prosperity or just incredibly annoying. Historians still argue whether elite Romans genuinely preferred their country villas for the fresh air or simply couldn't handle the urban shouting. As you move deeper into the city, you pass a giant milestone, literally a stone marking road distances. You brush your hand against it almost instinctively.
It's smooth from centuries of touches, and for a moment you feel strangely grounded. But then someone behind you complains loudly that you're blocking the way, and you shuffle sideways like a scolded school kid. Welcome to Rome, where even sacred infrastructure is someone's favorite leaning spot. A quirky historical tidbit floats into your mind as a cleaning agent. And if that doesn't scream, "Our lives are different," nothing will. You make a mental note never to shake hands with anyone who just came from washing dishes. A cart rumbles past, pulled by two donkeys that look mildly offended by existence. The wheels kick up dust, coating your clothes, your hair, and probably your soul. You sneeze loudly. Several people glance at you with mild suspicion, as if sneezing might be an omen. One woman touches a charm around her neck protectively. You give a weak smile that says, "I promise I'm not cursed," though you're starting to suspect maybe you are. You attempt a deep breath anyway, because your meditation app told you deep breathing is good for stress. Your lungs respond by sending you a polite but firm memo, "No thank you." The mix of smoke from early cooking fires, sweat, and the faint metallic tang of the Tiber River drifting in from the west does not qualify as relaxing air. A boy darts past you carrying a small clay figurine. Maybe a household god, maybe a toy, maybe he just likes clay. You hear two older men arguing animatedly nearby about whether Julius Caesar was too ambitious. You're impressed they're still debating it centuries after the fact, but that's Rome for you. Strong opinions, stronger voices. You catch the edge of a conversation where someone insists the empire's borders will last forever. Someone else laughs and mutters something about barbarians, while a third man shrugs and says historians in the future, meaning us, will probably argue endlessly about what barbarian even means. Fair point. You continue walking, feeling strangely excited and deeply overwhelmed at the same time. The sunlight grows warmer against your face, and the bustle around you becomes a living river of humanity. Everywhere you look, daily life is unfolding with the kind of unfiltered intensity that makes modern routines feel staged. A dog trots by carrying a piece of bread larger than its head. You genuinely consider following it because it looks like it has a better plan than you do. But despite the chaos, the smells, the heat, and the lingering fear of getting run over by a cart, there's something mesmerizing about this city. You can feel the pulse of Rome in your chest, ancient, sprawling, flawed, brilliant. And even though you're already exhausted from just existing here for 5 minutes, you can't deny the fascination pulling you forward. You take another careful step into the heart of the empire, where survival is less about strength and more about adapting quickly. And you're trying. You really are. You shuffle forward, still blinking away the dust of your grand Roman debut, and you quickly discover that the streets of Rome aren't streets the way you know them. They're more like chaotic suggestion zones, the kind of layout someone might sketch after 2 cups of wine and a shrug. You step onto a narrow stretch of stone slabs, uneven but clearly placed with purpose centuries before you were born, and immediately feel the city testing your balance, like it's trying to decide whether you deserve to be here. The stones, those famous Roman paving stones, aren't politely flat. They're lumpy, dented, chipped, and polished smooth in random places where thousands of feet, sandals, and cartwheels have dragged across them. One mainstream historical fact hits you fast. Romans designed these stones with deliberate gaps so rain could drain down into the sewers below. Practical? Absolutely. Comfortable for walking? Your ankles would like to file a complaint. You step aside as a mule cart barrels past, the driver shouting something that sounds suspiciously like, "Move or regret it."
You manage to hop out of the way, nearly slipping on what you really, truly hope is spilled water. The mule snorts at you with a level of disdain usually reserved for someone who tries to pet a cat without consent. And then it hits you. The smell. Not a subtle background kind of smell, no. Rome greets your nose like someone turned the aroma dial up to 11 and then broke the knob clean off. The scents layer on top of each other in ways your modern brain struggles to categorize. There's roasting meat from a nearby street vendor, fresh bread cooling on open racks, people sweating in the morning sun, animals going about their biological business, and, oh yes, the ever-present scent of the Roman sewer system. You glance down and spot one of the city's many drainage channels running between the paving stones, carrying a thin, slow-moving stream of questionable clarity. Historians still argue whether most waste actually made it into these drains or simply didn't. Given what's brushing past your sandal, you're leaning toward didn't. A woman balancing a basket on her hip marches confidently through the street and casually tosses the contents of a small clay pot into the gutter. You hear the splash. You do not investigate. You take a step backward, misjudge the angle, and bump into a man carrying freshly tanned hides. The smell hits you first, rich, earthy, and aggressively organic. He grumbles something about watching where you plant your feet. You try to apologize in your most respectful nod and smile combo. He eyes you like you're suspiciously polished for this neighborhood. As you continue walking, you notice that the streets aren't just random paths. They reflect the city's social map. The smoothest stones mark wealthier areas, while the rougher, cracked slabs belong to districts where repairs aren't exactly urgent. You run your fingers along a wall as you pass, feeling grooves carved into the stone from centuries of carts scraping along the tight corners. A quirky tidbit pops into your head. Some Romans installed little bumps or ledges on buildings to stop carts from grinding directly against the walls. They looked like tiny stone speed bumps for architecture. Every few steps, you spot public fountains trickling spring water into basins. Romans prided themselves on their aqueduct system, clean, fresh water delivered by gravity from miles away. It's one of the empire's proudest innovations, and you marvel at it. Then you watch a dog drink from the fountain, followed immediately by a small child rinsing a hand covered in grape mush. Okay, so clean is relative. You stop to examine a stepping stone crossing, a set of flat stones arranged like oversized buttons across the road. You've read about these. They let pedestrians cross when the street floods or when other liquids flow a bit too generously. You place a foot on the first stone, testing its wobble. It's surprisingly stable. You nod, pleased with yourself, and then nearly fall off when someone brushes past you with the momentum of a toddler fueled by honeyed pastries. As you regain your balance, you hear two men nearby debating, loudly, whether the Great Cloaca Maxima, Rome's legendary sewer, is the reason the city thrives or the reason everyone is always slightly ill. Historians still argue whether the sewer system actually improved public health or merely redistributed the problem. Based on the smell drifting up from the nearest grate, you're not convinced the jury has reached a verdict. You watch a group of workers clearing debris from a street corner with large wooden rakes. They work quickly, pushing trash, straw, and the occasional unidentifiable lump toward a collection area. One man uses a long-handled scoop to gather the waste and toss it into a wagon. You take a step back out of professionalism and self-preservation. Another worker whistles, calling out cheerfully, "Better than yesterday." That sentence concerns you deeply. A child runs past holding a small clay lamp, her bare feet slapping the stones confidently. You envy her balance. A pig trots after her,
probably escaping someone's kitchen or simply enjoying a stroll. The pig pauses to sniff your leg. You pretend not to notice, mostly because you don't want to upset something with tusks. You continue moving, trying to absorb everything without looking too overwhelmed. The street slopes downward, and you hear the rush of water ahead. A narrow canal splits the road, guiding runoff toward the river. You step carefully around it, feeling like you're participating in a real-life obstacle course. Romans surely burned plenty of calories just walking to the bakery. You spot a man sitting on a low stool, repairing sandals. His hands move with calm efficiency, threading leather strips through the sole and hammering small pegs into place. You admire the craftsmanship, noting that he probably made the sandals half the people around you are wearing. The fringe fact whispers into your mind. Some Romans stuffed wool or moss into their sandals for cushioning. You consider doing the same before you remember you don't actually have any Roman sandals yet. A woman next to him is selling tiny clay amulets shaped like eyes and hands. You pick up one shaped like a pudgy little fist. She explains it's to ward off bad luck. You nod because honestly, at this point, you could use all the help you can get. You place the amulet back gently before she decides you're attempting to buy it with your modern pockets full of nothing. The deeper you walk into the city, the louder the streets become. Vendors shout over one another, children laugh and chase each other through the crowd. Metal rings against stone, and someone begins playing a reed pipe with a tune you're pretty sure is supposed to be cheerful. It's actually kinda nice, until a cart rolls by with a wheel squeaking so violently it sounds like the soundtrack to your stress. A man carrying a basket of figs offers you one. You hesitate, remembering food safety rules from your century. But you also remember you're in ancient Rome, and refusing food can seem rude. So you take the fig, smile, and hope your modern digestive system doesn't resign immediately. The man beams at you, proud. You take a bite. It's actually delicious, sweet, warm from the sun, soft. For a moment, everything feels peaceful. Then someone dumps a full bucket of water from a second-story window. It misses you by inches, splattering loudly against the stones. The fig seller doesn't even flinch. You, however, nearly levitate in surprise. You look around, taking in the street one last time before moving onward. The uneven stones, the lively crowds, the sour-sweet smell of the gutters, the scattered animals, the bursts of laughter and conversation. It's chaotic, overwhelming, strangely beautiful, and undeniably trying its best to defeat you. Rome's streets aren't just paths, they're trials, and you've only just begun walking them. You continue down the bustling street, still trying to convince your senses that they're going to be okay, when your stomach suddenly remembers it exists. It gives a gentle grumble, nothing dramatic, just a polite nudge that says, hey, maybe find something edible before we faint like a Victorian poet. Unfortunately, you are in ancient Rome, where edible is interpretive. You glance around, scanning the stalls and vendors lining the street. Bread here, fruit there, someone loudly insisting their wine is the purest in the district. Although you watch a man pour suspiciously cloudy water into the jug and decide purity is relative. Your first real introduction to Roman cuisine arrives in the form of a small food stall tucked between a potter and a man selling used bronze tools. A woman ladles something thick and beige into bowls, handing them over to customers with practiced speed. The smell hits you, savory, earthy, and vaguely comforting. You lean closer and realize it's pulse, the Roman porridge basically everyone ate when they couldn't afford anything else, which was often. It looks harmless enough, like oatmeal's ancient cousin. You watch someone sprinkle herbs into their bowl to jazz it up. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. This simple porridge fed soldiers, farmers, and emperors alike at some point.
A true cross-class meal, though the rich versions were undeniably more edible. Still, the woman gestures to you with a ladle. You politely shake your head because while porridge is fine, you're not mentally prepared to commit yet. You wander farther down, your stomach getting increasingly pushy. Then you spot a street vendor grilling small fish on skewers. They smell incredible. You get close, maybe too close, because the vendor grins at you like he's just found today's easiest customer. He waves a skewer toward you, the fish sizzling, and you notice something unsettling. The eyes. Still intact. Still staring. You swallow hard. Romans didn't waste food, and fish came as is. Head, tail, and everything in between. A quirky tidbit rises unhelpfully in your mind. Some Romans believed eating fish eyes made your own eyesight sharper. You decide this is officially too immersive for your morning. Maybe later, and step away, trying not to offend the fish. A little farther along, you find another stall selling bread. Different breads, actually. Round loaves stamped with bakery marks so people could identify who made them. You pick one up. It's firm. Really firm, like if bread and a paperweight had a baby. You tap it lightly, wondering if you need a small saw to open it. The vendor raises an eyebrow. You pretend you totally know how to handle first-century carbohydrates and put it down casually, as though you didn't just nearly strain your wrist lifting it. Your stomach protests again, loudly. A nearby dog looks at you, insulted that you didn't share that noise with food. Fine, you think. Time to be brave. You wander toward a stall offering fruit, apples, grapes, figs. Much safer. Except the grapes have an unusual coating that isn't dust, but wax from nearby candles. You decide a fig is the safest option, remembering the one you tasted earlier. The fruit seller hands you a fresh fig. You take a bite. It's sweet, soft, delicious. You could live on these. You absolutely cannot live on these. Because now you want real food, and Rome is full of it. You steel your nerves and approach the next vendor, who is ladling what appears to be stew into bowls. It smells hearty, rich, with hints of garlic and herbs. You're intrigued until you learn the main ingredient. Garum, a sauce made of fermented fish guts. You freeze. Your nose twitches. The vendor beams. Romans loved garum. They put it in everything. Stews, meats, vegetables, even desserts sometimes. It was basically their ketchup, if ketchup was capable of frightening you. The stew might be fine. The stew might also send your modern digestive system into full gladiator mode, and you're not sure who would win. Historians still argue whether garum was delicious, disgusting, or simply something Romans pretended to enjoy out of patriotic obligation. You lean toward disgusting, though you try not to judge too loudly in case someone hears and agrees to duel you over it. You step back and try to regroup. Maybe something simpler, something universally safe, something like cheese. You find a cheese vendor easily enough. His stall offers wedges of pale goat cheese wrapped in leaves, soft curds in little baskets, and wheels of hard cheese that could probably stop an arrow. You pick up a soft one, sniff it, and immediately realize Roman cheese doesn't smell like modern refrigerated cheese. It smells alive, aggressively alive. You thank the vendor and step away before the cheese gains sentience. Your hunger is now bordering on theatrical. Your brain begins whispering, "Water? Let's try water." But the moment you see people dipping cups straight into a shared basin, you remember the Tiber River is only marginally safer than drinking hot bath water mixed with optimism. A man selling watered wine waves you over. This is promising. Wine is boiled during production, right? That's safer? Probably? Hopefully? Romans typically mixed wine with water because drinking full-strength wine was considered barbaric. They actually judged people who didn't dilute it. So you accept a cup of pale, watered wine and take a cautious sip. It tastes okay, slightly sour, a little warm, faint hints of herbs. But your stomach relaxes, your shoulders relax. For a moment, you feel daringly Roman. And that's when a vendor 2 stalls down offers you stuffed dormice. You blink. You stare. You blink again. Yes, dormice, stuffed with nuts and spices. A delicacy for the wealthy. A special treat. You are not wealthy. You are not special. You are backing away slowly. The vendor grins like he knows your soul is leaving your body. You retreat to safer culinary territory, fruit and wine. You take another sip, savoring the relief creeping into your limbs. But as you stand there, watching Rome swirl around you in its vibrant morning chaos, you realize something important. Eating here isn't just nourishment, it's a gamble, a dance, a daily negotiation with flavor, texture, and whatever microbes the ancient world wants to throw your way. A couple of children dart past, each holding a small clay bowl filled with porridge. One has honey drizzled on top. It actually looks pretty good. The kid notices you staring, shrugs, and offers you a spoonful with absolute sincerity. You smile, thankful, and gently decline. You're already pushing your microbiome to the brink. Nearby, 2 older men argue animatedly about whether wine mixed with seawater tastes better or worse. One insists it's an acquired taste. The other says it's a punishment. Historians still argue about that too. A woman plucks herbs from a basket, mint, coriander, thyme, and scatters them across her bread. For a moment, you breathe in the aroma and feel almost at peace. Then someone walks past carrying a bucket of freshly caught eels, one of which wriggles vigorously, slapping the side of the bucket like it's trying to negotiate its escape. You step far away, protecting both your dignity and your ankles. After everything you've seen, tasted, and strongly refused to taste, one thing becomes clear. Your modern stomach is simply not built for the Roman Empire. The ingredients are fresh, but the methods bold, unfiltered, sometimes a little too unfiltered. You take one final sip of the watered wine and hand the cup back gently. Your hunger has calmed enough to let you continue, even if your digestive system is now quietly saying, "Please don't do that again." But hey, you survived Roman breakfast. Barely. You start walking again, nursing the last ghost of watered wine warmth in your chest, when you realize something you hadn't yet noticed with your full attention. Everyone is staring at you. Not constantly, not dramatically, but enough to make your modern brain perk up like, okay, what's wrong with my face? Then it hits you. It's the clothes, the very non-Roman, extremely suspicious clothes, and the hair, and the fact that you're clean in a way Romans rarely were after breakfast. And just as you're thinking, wow, I should probably blend in better, you catch sight of a group of Romans lounging outside a small workshop, dressed in that iconic draped fabric you've only ever seen in movies. Except in real life, it looks less like a fashion statement and more like someone fought a rebellious bedsheet and lost. A man in a knee-length tunic walks past you confidently, his linen garment simple, belted, and surprisingly practical. You can see why tunics were the daily uniform here, airy, easy to move in, and perfect for a climate that decided to be permanently warm. A mainstream historical fact nudges your mind with 2 stripes down the front, clavi, to show their social status. Senators had wide purple stripes, knights had narrow ones.
You glance around and confirm, yes, fashion here is basically social media. Except instead of followers, you show off your rank with stripes your mom would absolutely iron wrong. A tailor spots you staring and waves you closer. His stall is filled with bolts of wool and linen, small wooden boxes holding bone needles, and bundles of dyed thread. He looks you up and down with the same energy modern stylists use when someone walks into a fancy boutique wearing pajamas.
"You look like you need something," he says. You can't argue with that. The tailor holds up a tunic against you. It's simple, off-white, and roughly your size. Perfectly acceptable Roman starter gear. Then he holds up another tunic dyed a rich reddish purple. You know enough to panic. Nope, that's elite territory. You are not elite. You cannot afford elite. You cannot even afford socks right now. You gesture politely toward the plainest tunic available. He nods knowingly, perhaps too knowingly, and begins folding it for you, chatting the whole time about fabric prices, which are not cheap, and dyes, which are aggressively not cheap. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Tyrian purple came from squeezing thousands of tiny sea snails. It was so expensive that wearing it without permission could actually get you in trouble. Serious trouble. Like, we think you might be pretending to be a senator trouble. You clutch the plain tunic a little tighter. The tailor gestures toward a changing area in the back, a curtained corner at best. Before you commit to trying it on, you hesitantly ask if he has anything like pants. His face contorts like you told him you sleep in a bathtub filled with eels. Romans do not trust pants. They see them as barbarian clothing. Pants are for cold places, wild places, people who throw spears and possibly eat snow for fun. You nod solemnly. No pants, understood. You head behind the curtain and pull on the tunic. The fabric is scratchier than your modern clothes, but surprisingly comfortable once it settles. You tie the belt and step out, bracing for the tailor's critique. He beams proudly. "Much better," he says, as though he personally rescued you from the brink of a fashion disaster. You now look like a regular Roman citizen, which, of course, you are not. You try to pay him, but you have no coins. None. Zero. Not even a shiny pebble. You freeze. He crosses his arms. You desperately pat your pockets like that will magically produce a credit card. You consider offering your shoes, but they're modern sneakers and definitely going to spark wild rumors. You start to panic when the tailor's expression suddenly softens. He waves dismissively. "First-time customer," he says. "Pay later." You nod gratefully, fully intending to flee this district before he remembers what you owe. But you appreciate the kindness, and the fact that he didn't loudly accuse you of sorcery for showing up broke. Back on the street, you pull at the tunic's neckline, adjusting it until it stops feeling like a potato sack. You catch your reflection, well, your distorted outline, in a polished bronze tray hanging in another stall. You actually look decent, like someone who belongs here, or at least someone who won't immediately be suspected of stealing bread. Speaking of adjustments, your hair is doing you no favors. Romans liked hair neat, oiled, styled. You look like you stuck your head out of a fast-moving chariot. You pass a barber shop, Tonstrina, and peek inside. A man is sitting in a chair while the barber trims his beard with a small bronze razor. Next to him, another man holds a tiny mirror and supervises, complaining loudly about a single hair being too short. You think this is dramatic until you remember Romans considered barbers vital to society. It was like having a therapist, stylist, and neighborhood gossip all in one. A young apprentice waves you in, and you decide, why not? Worst case, they give you bangs and start a trend 2,000 years early. You sit down and the barber inspects your hair. He hums thoughtfully. He begins trimming with controlled, practiced motions. As he works, he chats about the latest local scandal, something involving a man cheating at dice, a lost goat, and a very angry wife. You nod politely, trying to pretend you understand at least 30% of it. A French fact floats by. Romans used scented oils instead of shampoo, and barbers sometimes doubled as minor surgeons, offering bloodletting or mole removal. You eye the tray of tools nervously and pray today is just a haircut day. When he finishes, you feel significantly more presentable. A little oiled, a little trimmed, a little like you've joined the Roman version of a makeover montage. Stepping outside again, you begin to notice something interesting. Blending feels safer, calmer, like the city is slightly less interested in swallowing you whole. You pass a group of women wearing flowing stoli layered over tunics, the fabric falling gracefully in pleats that probably took forever to get right. One of them adjusts her hair with long pins made of bone or bronze arranged in elaborate waves. You try not to stare. Two men nearby argue passionately about whether short hair is superior to long hair. One insists long hair makes him look youthful. The other claims long hair makes him look like a poet, which he says is fine, except poets don't get paid. Historians still argue whether Roman hairstyles shifted with fashion or with politics, or some chaotic blend of both. As you walk, you glance down at your feet. Sandals. That's what you need next. Proper Roman sandals, not your modern shoes that are already attracting stares like you're walking on marshmallows. A cobbler invites you over. He measures your foot with a piece of string and starts assembling straps. Roman sandals are brilliant, simple, breathable, durable. They're also loud. When he ties the final knot and you take your first steps, you sound like a person who has just been given flip-flops and is learning to walk all over again. You look like a Roman now. You sound like a Roman now. You even smell slightly like a Roman now, thanks to the barber's scented oil. People stop staring, which feels incredibly good. You take a deep breath, feeling the tunic settle around your shoulders, the sandals gripping your feet, the haircut cooling your neck, and for the first time since arriving in the Empire, you feel almost prepared. Almost. Because if Rome demands anything, it's constant adaptation. And you're finally starting to catch up. You drift farther along the sun-baked road, dust rising around your ankles like a lazy ghost that can't decide whether to haunt you or just make your sandals even filthier. Your stomach grumbles again, louder this time, as if protesting the fact that your breakfast was basically a fistful of floury mush and a dream. You glance around for anything that might resemble a snack stand, but all you see are a few goats, a stall selling wilted herbs, and a man chewing on something that looks suspiciously like a twig. He seems content though, so maybe he's discovered the ancient Roman version of bubble gum. You consider trying it, then immediately decide no, you're not that desperate. Yet. As you move closer to a cluster of stone buildings, the kind that look like they've stood here since the dawn of annoyance, you realize this must be your next challenge, actually finding something edible. Romans weren't completely hopeless with food, of course. They had bread, olives, cheese, figs, wine, and enough fish sauce to make your modern stomach gently opt out of existence. But the part they don't tell you on those romanticized history tours is that all of that varies wildly depending on who you are. And you're basically nobody. You don't have a senator's coin purse, you don't have an aristocrat's pantry, and you definitely don't have a legionary's daily grain allowance. You're just some person, a drifter in a tunic with no social capital, which means you're about to learn a hard Roman truth. Eating here isn't just a matter of appetite, it's a matter of status, stamina, and sheer luck. You wander into what passes for a food market, and immediately you're greeted with the scent of smoke, the tang of vinegar, and the unmistakable aroma of something fish-based that might actually be plotting your demise. A vendor waves a jar of murky liquid at you, garum, the famous fermented fish sauce the Romans put on literally everything. Bread, garum. Vegetables, garum. Your hopes and dreams, probably also garum. You take one tentative sniff and feel your soul briefly leave your body for a walk around the block. Still, there's a quirky historical tidbit drifting in the back of your mind. Some Romans actually believed garum had healing properties, like a sort of fishy sports drink. You're not convinced, but you also don't want to insult the vendor who is staring at you like he's about to charge you just for breathing near his stall. You try browsing for alternatives, but your options are limited. A sad pile of onions, a stack of coarse bread that looks like it's already pre-digested, a half-full amphora of wine watered down so aggressively it may as well be flavored air. There's a man selling cheese, which feels promising until you remember that Roman cheese was often aged in ways that historians still argue about. Some say it was spectacular, others say it was basically an ancient prank. You hold a piece in your hand, sniff it, and immediately put it back down. You're not falling for that one. You remind yourself of one mainstream historical fact you read somewhere. Most Romans, especially the lower classes, relied heavily on grain-based foods. Porridge, bread, and more porridge. You spot a food stall selling bowls of exactly that. The vendor shoves one into your hands before you can object. It's warm, filling, and roughly the texture of despair. But honestly, it's not that bad. You eat quietly, listening to the sounds of the street, the shuffling of sandals, the distant clatter of carts. For a moment, you actually feel like you're blending in. Then, someone bumps your shoulder, hard. You turn to find a tall man glaring at you, his toga draped in a way that screams, "I'm important and I know it." He mutters something about space, something about watching where you're going, and strides off without giving you the chance to explain that he was the one who barreled into you. But hey, welcome to Rome. Personal space doesn't exist yet. You sigh, finish your porridge, and wipe your hands on your tunic, which now also smells faintly of fish sauce. Great, you're officially marinated. Still hungry, and increasingly aware that you won't survive at this rate, you wander deeper into the neighborhood until you stumble upon an ancient fast food joint, a thermopolium. Counters with big ceramic jars set into them. Hot food ladled out to anyone with a coin. This looks promising. The owner offers you a dish of lentils seasoned with herbs, and your stomach practically sings. You dig in, careful this time not to inhale the food like a startled squirrel. Lentils are safe. Lentils won't betray you. As you eat, you overhear a group nearby arguing about something political, loudly and enthusiastically. Romans love debating everything: food, politics, public baths, whose cousin is marrying above their rank. And here's your scholarly debate moment of the day. Historians still argue whether thermopolia were mostly used by the poor or if wealthier folks frequented them too. You glance around at the mix of people, laborers, travelers, a couple of well-dressed merchants, and realize the truth was probably somewhere in the soft, lentil-filled middle. You finish your meal feeling almost functional, which is rare for you in this strange ancient world. You thank the owner, step outside, and take a deep breath. The sun has shifted, the day is warming, and your stomach, blessedly, is not complaining. For now. Of course, as soon as you start walking again, a sudden wave of fatigue hits you. Maybe it's the heat, maybe it's the food coma, or maybe it's the fact that you've probably ingested enough smoke, dust, and fermented fish fumes to qualify as a controlled substance. You blink through the haze and keep moving, reminding yourself of one important thing. This place isn't designed for comfort, it's designed for endurance. And you're not exactly built like a Roman farmer waking up at dawn to plow a field with nothing but determination and calf muscles carved by the gods. Still, you keep going, a little steadier now, a little more prepared, and with just enough humor to whisper to yourself, "At least I didn't eat the cheese." Not yet, anyway. You continue down the crowded streets with a belly that feels not full, exactly, but at least negotiated with. The sun hangs overhead like a bored landlord, and you fan yourself with your hand as you walk. But soon, an even more pressing discomfort creeps up. The slow, dawning awareness that you smell questionable. Not, "I walked briskly to class" questionable, more like, "I've been rotisserie spun over an open fire while someone sprinkled me with ancient Roman street dust." And so naturally, your brain points out the obvious solution. You need a bath. Fortunately, in Rome, this is something you can fix, sort of. Public baths are the Roman answer to everything. Need to relax, to socialize, to get news, to talk politics, to gossip about that senator who bought a suspiciously large number of peacock feathers? Baths. Always baths. But of course, nothing is ever simple for you, the time-displaced wanderer who's basically one lost sandal away from a full meltdown. You follow the flowing crowd until the sounds of conversation echo under vaulted stone arches. A large structure looms ahead, a bath complex, bigger than any gym or spa you've ever seen. The walls are warm to the touch, heated by the fires below, and everything smells faintly of oil, steam, and ambition. You pay a small fee to the attendant, half your remaining coins, and step inside. Immediately, the air shifts. It's humid, buzzing with voices, and filled with the sight of people undressing like this is the most normal thing in the world. Because here, it is. Romans aren't shy about bathing. They're also not shy about staring at you, the stranger with the uneven tunic tan lines and a confused expression that screams, "Help me!" Still, you try to act like you belong. You take a deep breath, remind yourself that you watched at least one documentary about this once, and start shedding layers. And then you come face to face with the first challenge of the Roman bath, the oil and strigil situation. See, Romans didn't use soap the way you do. Instead, they slathered themselves in oil. Yep, full body marination. Then scraped it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. All the sweat, dust, dirt, and questionable life choices get scraped away in one satisfying swoop. At least, that's the idea. Your attempt is less satisfying swoop and more gentle exfoliation performed by someone who's never held a metal scraper in their life. Oil drips down your arm, you drop the strigil, twice. A man beside you clucks his tongue and shows you how to hold it properly, scraping his own shoulder with practiced ease. He looks like he's been doing this since the Republic was founded. You manage a slightly better pass the next time. Not perfect, but not terrible. And honestly, that's your brand in ancient Rome. Slightly better than terrible. Once you're sufficiently shiny, you move into the warm room, the tepidarium. The heat wraps around you like a weighted blanket, and your muscles unwind in slow motion. You sit on a bench, listening to the soft murmur of conversations in Latin. A group of older men discuss grain prices. Two young men argue about chariot racing. Someone complains, loudly, about his neighbor's goat, which apparently has boundary issues. And you soak it all in, grateful for the temporary peace. A mainstream historical fact floats up in your mind. They were social hubs. Men, and sometimes women, depending on the day and the rules, gathered to talk, plan, gossip, and decompress. Honestly, it's like a spa day mixed with a town hall meeting, sprinkled with light judgment. Eventually, you move into the caldarium, the hottest room, and instantly regret your life choices. The air is thick, like soup-level thick. You can't decide whether you're sweating out toxins or just your will to live. A bead of sweat rolls down your temple, then down your neck, then down your entire personality. You sit on the heated stone bench and try not to look like you're dying. A Roman beside you nods, approving your suffering. To him, this is normal, healthy even. To you, it's like being slow cooked in your own worries. You last 5 minutes before you stand up abruptly, reconsider everything, and wobble your way out into the cool breeze of the frigidarium, the cold plunge. And there it is, a pool of icy water waiting to challenge your courage and, frankly, your sanity. You take one step in, then another, and suddenly your entire body screams, "No!" while your brain screams, "Just do it!" and your heart quietly whispers, "We didn't sign up for this." Still, you dunk yourself with all the determination of someone trying not to embarrass themselves historically. The cold hits you like a slap from Poseidon himself, but, shockingly, you feel awake, alive, almost refreshed. Almost. On your way back out to dry off, you overhear something interesting, a quirky tidbit you vaguely recall. Some Romans believed baths could cure everything from headaches to melancholy. A good scrape, a hot soak, a cold plunge, the ancient equivalent of, have you tried turning yourself off and on again? But your refreshment is short-lived, because as you dress, you notice something missing. Your coin pouch. Gone. Vanished. You look around wildly. But of course, nobody is going to point at themselves and say, "Yes, hello, I am the thief." Roman baths were notoriously known for this. Theft was so common that some people hired attendants solely to watch their stuff. You did not, because you didn't know, and because you assumed everyone here was just trying to relax, not practice the ancient art of petty larceny. Historians still argue whether bathhouse theft was exaggerated in ancient writings or genuinely rampant. But given your current situation, your pouch gone, your wallet metaphorically slapped, you're leaning toward rampant. Now you're standing there, freshly oiled, lightly steamed, and completely broke. Fantastic! Another day in ancient Rome. You step outside with your tunic sticking to your damp skin and your finances sticking to the memory of whoever just robbed you. The street noise hits your ears again, the clatter of carts, the calls of vendors, the laughter of children chasing each other. Life moves on around you while you mentally calculate how long you can survive on your remaining pride. Still, as you walk away from the bathhouse, you take comfort in one thing. You're probably the cleanest you've ever been in ancient Rome. That's something. And maybe, just maybe, you've unlocked a tiny piece of Roman life. One bath at a time. Even if that bath cost you your entire wallet. But hey, at least you smell better. For now. You walk away from the bathhouse with the kind of forced confidence people get right after being publicly humbled. You smell better, yes, but you're also broke, damp, and acutely aware that your coin pouch is now living its best life with someone else. The bustling street hums around you, full of people who seem to know exactly where they're going. Meanwhile, you're just trying to figure out how to not starve, not get lost, and not die of embarrassment in a world where everyone seems to be constantly judging your tunic. As you wander, you start to notice a shift in the crowd. More children running barefoot, more worn tunics, more tired faces hauling baskets, tools, and bundles of who knows what. The pleasantish scent of baked bread fades away and is replaced by something more realistic, earthy, smoky, a little sour. This isn't the postcard Rome from movies. This is the real city, the Insula district, the apartments, the crammed, lively, loud, chaotic maze where most real Romans lived.
You remind yourself of a mainstream historical fact: around 90% of Romans in the city lived in these multi-story buildings called insulae, essentially ancient apartment complexes that ranged from decent to absolutely should not pass fire safety. Yours, naturally, will fall somewhere between okay and mildly cursed. The building you approach looks like it's been holding itself upright out of sheer spite. Wooden balconies lean at angles that defy structural logic. Laundry hangs from every window like decorative surrender flags. A man on the second story is arguing with someone unseen, and you can't tell if it's a neighbor or a pigeon. Honestly, either would make sense here. You climb the stairs, which creak in a way that suggests they have structural trust issues, and reach your tiny rented room. Barely big enough for a straw mattress, a stool, and your hopes and dreams, which take up no space at all. But you haven't spent much time here yet because, well, surviving outside it has been a full-time job. Still, you step inside, take a deep breath, and immediately cough. Because the room smells like dust, old straw, and whatever your downstairs neighbor is cooking. Is that cabbage? Burnt cabbage? Burnt cabbage with hints of despair? Hard to tell. You set your things down, what little you still have, and step back outside into the hallway, drawn by the sound of clattering pots and echoing voices. You need to blend in with the locals if you're going to survive. You also need a plan, because being coinless in ancient Rome is basically like playing life on hard mode with the random misfortune setting toggled on. You head down toward the central courtyard where several families share space for cooking, gossiping, and aggressively ignoring each other. A woman stirs a pot over a small fire, glances at you, and then returns to her soup as if you're just another addition to her background scenery. Kids chase each other in circles, a dog naps in the shade. Someone upstairs drops something heavy, and everyone flinches in unified annoyance. You overhear two men talking about rent. Another quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Some Roman landlords were infamous for raising prices constantly, forcing tenants to squeeze into smaller and smaller rooms. One ancient satirist joked that landlords would charge extra for letting you breathe near a window. You don't have proof of that, but given your building, it tracks. You lean against a cracked pillar, taking it all in. The insula is loud, cramped, and slightly dangerous, but weirdly alive in a way that feels familiar. Like the older parts of a modern city where neighbors know each other's schedules, smells, and worst habits whether they like to or not. As you watch the organized chaos, you feel a small flicker of comfort. You might actually survive here. Maybe. Then the floor shakes. Just a tiny tremor, a little shudder beneath your feet. But in an insula, that's like hearing someone cough politely on a plane. It might be fine, or you might be headed straight for disaster. For a split second, you imagine the whole building collapsing like a poorly made sandwich. Your eyes widen. You brace yourself. But nothing happens. The tremor fades. People glance up, shrug, and carry on with their lives. You, however, are still frozen in place, like someone just whispered tax audit into your ear. Historians still argue whether insula collapses were as frequent as some writers claimed, or whether the sources exaggerated for dramatic flair. But standing here, one heartbeat away from becoming architectural debris, you're willing to believe the dramatic version. You decide to get some fresh air, as in air that hasn't been filtered through 300 people's cooking fires and arguments. You slip out onto the street, weaving past vendors and children, and someone carrying too many chickens for one person to logically manage. You wander until you reach a row of bakeries where warm loaves sit in neat stacks. The smell hits you like a hug made of carbs. Bread, blessed bread. Romans relied on it daily, another mainstream fact, and bakeries were lifelines for entire neighborhoods. You even remember hearing about the annona,
Rome's grain supply system that kept the city fed. You consider buying a loaf, then remember your wallet is currently enjoying a vacation. You sigh loudly. Fortunately, the baker must mistake this for hunger because he tosses you a slightly too hard end piece from an old loaf. "For the road," he says, waving you off like he's doing Rome's good deed of the day. You accept it gratefully. You nibble on it. The bread is dense, chewy, and tastes mildly of charcoal. Honestly, not bad. It's edible. Barely. You keep walking, chewing your stale bread, passing a storyteller entertaining a small crowd with tales of heroic soldiers. You pause, listening. The man gestures wildly, recounting battles, glory, triumph. The audience is enthralled. You can't help but smile, even though his version of history is about 60% accuracy and 40% dramatic flair. And that's when it hits you. You're learning. Slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely learning how to exist here. You've eaten their food, walked their streets, bathed in their baths, and been robbed in them, and now you're living in their overcrowded apartment blocks. You could almost forget you don't belong here. Almost. Then someone dumps a chamber pot from a window above you, splashing suspiciously close to your feet. You jump back, horrified. Right. Reality check delivered. This is still ancient Rome. You take a deep breath, step over the puddle, and continue walking with the quiet dignity of someone pretending not to have seen their life flash before their eyes. Still, as gross as that moment was, you can't help but think, you're getting better at this. Not good, but better. And in ancient Rome, maybe that's enough. You continue down the street, shaking off the near miss with the chamber pot, like you're brushing away the world's least welcome blessing. The sky is starting to soften into afternoon light, and the air carries that warm, buzzing energy of a city that never quite slows down. But as you step into a wider square, bustling with carts, animals, merchants, and more shouting than your modern ears can process, you notice something else creeping into your awareness. This place is loud. Not busy cafe loud. More like every person in a stadium arguing at full volume. You squint up at the chaotic tangle of voices bouncing off stone walls, and you realize you're finally standing at one of Rome's most famous institutions, its markets. Specifically, the big, messy, unpredictable sprawl of outdoor trade where everything from figs to furniture to illegal opinions is available for purchase. And your first thought is, I have no money. Your second thought is, I want to leave immediately. But Rome doesn't care about your thoughts. Rome drags you forward by sheer force of curiosity, or maybe the crowd just pushes you along. Within moments, you're in the middle of a sea of humanity. People bargain, gesture, shove, haggle, and occasionally break into arguments so dramatic they could win seasonal awards. A vendor selling pottery yells at someone who knocked over a bowl. A woman screams over the price of olives. Two men accuse each other of watering down wine, which is a serious insult in this economy. Then there's a guy shouting about miracle goat milk. You sidestep his enthusiasm. Everywhere you look, something's happening. But your attention is snagged by something odd. A man at a stall is selling lead pipes. Actual lead. For water, for homes. And the customers? They're thrilled. You blink hard because you remember one of those quirky history tidbits. Romans used lead extensively in plumbing. Pipes, basins, baths, you name it. Sure, some modern scholars say the effect of lead poisoning on Roman society is exaggerated. Others argue it caused health issues across centuries. Historians still argue whether lead contributed significantly to Rome's decline or not, but, buddy, being here in person, you're leaning toward probably yes. You shudder a little and step away before the enthusiastic pipe salesman tries to get you to upgrade your non-existent household. Nearby, another crowd gathers around a fishmonger whose display is pungent. Impressive, but pungent. You remind yourself that fresh fish traveled fast in Rome thanks to bustling ports and insane logistics. But you also remember that fish spoils quickly in Mediterranean heat, so you give that stall a wide berth. Too wide, apparently, because you bump into a man balancing a crate of figs. The figs scatter everywhere like small fruity marbles. He yells at you. You apologize. He yells more. You apologize again. Eventually, he gives up and storms off, leaving you standing in a crater of ruined produce and wounded dignity. You brush yourself off and keep walking, trying to look like someone who makes fewer mistakes than you clearly do. At a stall selling spices, you stop for a moment. Rows of clay jars hold saffron, cinnamon, pepper, and herbs from across the empire. The vendor boasts loudly about his pepper being fresh from India. That catches your attention because you remember the mainstream historical fact that Rome had extensive trade routes all the way to the Indian subcontinent. Spices, silk, gems, luxury goods for the wealthy. You, on the other hand, can't afford an oregano crumb. As you drift deeper into the market, something changes. The noise shifts, the smells intensify, and the people change. The faces are harsher, the clothes more ragged, the goods more dubious. You've walked, without noticing, right into the Subura, one of Rome's most notorious neighborhoods. The place where the poor, the desperate, the ambitious, and the unfortunate all collide. You know this place from history books. Pickpockets, brothels, street vendors selling knockoff goods, dice gamblers shouting over fortunes made and lost, houses packed tighter than your modern phone storage. A young boy nearly barrels into you on purpose. You catch his wrist just before he snatches your belt. He wriggles free and disappears down an alley like a mischievous ferret. You check yourself, nothing missing, mostly because there's nothing left to steal. Honestly, that's your biggest advantage right now. Still, you decide to stay alert. The Subura is a place where it's best to look like you know what you're doing, even if you absolutely do not. A woman selling amulets calls out to you. Protection charm! Keeps thieves away. You don't have money, but the irony is strong enough that you almost laugh. If anything, you need a charm to protect the thieves from you. You're a walking bad luck magnet. You wander past a tavern door where a man slams a cup onto the table so loudly that wine splashes into the street. Another tries to break up a fight by waving a chunk of bread like a weapon. Two kids run past you carrying something that looks suspiciously like a stolen chicken. You take a breath. The Subura is chaotic, yes, but also fascinating. This is where real city life happens. Wild, unpredictable, noisy, gritty, alive. It's the part of Rome that tourist scrolls never mention because it doesn't fit the marble and glory narrative. And yet, you don't feel unsafe. Nervous, sure, but there's something strangely human here. People are living their lives, laughing, struggling, surviving. Kind of like you, except they're better at it. You decide to follow a small procession of people heading toward a wider street. They seem calm enough, less chaotic than the dice players, more alert than the pickpockets. Eventually, you find yourself standing before a cluster of small shrines set into the corners of buildings. Lamps flicker softly. Offerings, bread, figs, small coins, rest inside little niches. The lares, the household and neighborhood guardian spirits. People pause, whisper quiet prayers, or lay symbolic items at the shrines. One man places a tiny carved dog figure. A woman leaves a pinch of salt. A child drops a pebble she clearly believes is lucky.
You feel yourself exhale slowly. Even in the chaos, there's ritual, comfort, a small pocket of calm in the whirlwind of Roman life. You step up to one shrine and place nothing. You have nothing. But you take a moment anyway. Maybe the layers will accept the gift of your heartfelt confusion. As you walk away, you notice a small smile tugging at your lips. For once, you're not merely surviving. You're observing, absorbing, becoming part of the swirl around you. At least until a loud crash makes everyone jump. A runaway cart barrels down the street. People dive out of the way. You freeze, again, because apparently panic is your primary instinct. A man yanks you by the collar, pulling you to safety just moments before the cart rattles past like a rolling death wish. You stammer a thank you. He nods once, mutters something like, "Pay attention," and disappears into the crowd before you can blink. You pat your chest, take a shaky breath, and remind yourself Rome is not trying to kill you. It's just very good at it. Still, as you stand there amidst the fading adrenaline, one thing becomes clear. You're learning how to navigate this place. Cautiously, awkwardly, deeply aware that you might still die at any moment. But learning. Morning drifts slowly into the Roman streets like a soft breath warming the stones, and you find yourself drawn toward a sound that is both chaotic and strangely comforting. It's not music exactly, but a living rhythm, a blend of shouts, footsteps, distant clatter, and the flutter of birds hoping for crumbs. It takes only a moment to realize that the noise is coming from one of Rome's many bustling markets. And whether you feel ready or not, today is the day you will have to venture into it. The Romans call these places macella, and stepping into one is like stepping into the beating heart of the city. It isn't designed for quiet reflection or gentle wandering. A macellum is loud, alive, and slightly overwhelming, a place where business, gossip, smells, and movement tangle together in a way that leaves you both fascinated and unsure where to place your feet. Yet, despite your hesitation, there is something strangely inviting about it. The closer you walk, the more the sounds weave a kind of steady, vibrating hum. Something that might be jarring in the daylight, but becomes almost hypnotic when you allow yourself to drift with it. You pass through a stone archway, and suddenly the market opens in front of you like a labyrinth. At first, your senses don't know where to focus. Everywhere you look, there is motion. Merchants with loud, trained voices call out to anyone who makes eye contact, sometimes even to those who don't. A man selling figs raises a basket and shakes it lightly, releasing a sweet scent that cuts through the warm, dusty air. A woman with an apron stained deep with wine pours a deep red sample into a small clay cup for a customer who swirls it with the practiced flick of someone who knows exactly what they're looking for. The drinker nods, and a sale is made with a gesture rather than words. You take a few steps inside, and the ground changes beneath your feet. Smooth stone worn by thousands of sandals before yours. The paving dips just slightly in the center, forming a shallow channel used for washing away scraps and spills. A few small puddles glint in the morning light, though you try not to think too hard about what they contain. The market smells like 1,000 different things all at once. Sweet honey cakes, warm bread, fish carried in from the river only hours earlier, fresh herbs crushed unknowingly underfoot and intentionally in mortar bowls, the metallic scent of bronze tools, the soft, dusty perfume of dried grains, and somewhere not far away, a sharp scent that lets you know that not all goods here are edible. People brush past you, but it's never aggressive, just the natural closeness of a place where space is precious and everyone has errands to complete. You try to step aside, but adjusting to the flow takes time.
The market has its own rules, and at first, you're more of an obstacle than a participant. A vendor notices your confusion and laughs softly, not unkindly, and waves you closer. He is selling olives of every kind you can imagine: green, black, wrinkled, smooth, tiny ones the size of grapes, and enormous ones stuffed with slivers of garlic. The bowls glisten in the light, each lined with oil that reflects little moving patches of sky overhead. He offers you one. You hesitate, then take it, and the taste is stronger than you expected. Salty, rich, almost too bold. But there is something comforting in that intensity, something that anchors you for a moment. "Good, yes?" the vendor says with a proud grin. You nod, and he laughs again, returning to the business of calling customers to his stall. You keep walking. To your left, a butcher's stall stretches beneath a canvas canopy. The smell here shifts sharply, heavy, rich, unmistakably animal. Cuts of meat hang from hooks, some already portioned, others still whole. A cat sits below, tail twitching, waiting patiently for someone to drop a scrap. You give the butcher a polite nod but hurry past. This corner of the market tests even the sturdiest modern stomach. On your right, a potter arranges stacks of bowls and cups with careful hands. His wares are simple but beautiful, soft earthen hues with delicate patterns etched around the rims. He notices you lingering and lifts one, turning it toward the light so you can see the faint spiral design carved into the side. It's subtle but charming, and for a moment you imagine taking it home, before remembering that home is still centuries away. Still, the thought brings a gentle warmth to your chest. Other vendors shout prices. Some argue. A few bargain so aggressively that you wonder if you should intervene. But then, just as quickly, both sides relax, shrug, and complete the sale with cheerful smiles. This is Roman culture in motion. Sharp, direct, sometimes dramatic, but rarely malicious. As you walk deeper into the macellum, the crowds thicken. Stalls become closer together, their awnings overlapping to create a patchwork roof that filters the sunlight into shifting patterns. A breeze pushes through, carrying a soft fluttering of fabric overhead. Children weave between adults, laughing as they chase each other. A dog trots behind a baker, clearly familiar with the routine. It's noisy, yes, but the kind of noise that softens when you stop resisting it. Layered, rhythmic, almost meditative if you let your mind drift with it. You come across a stand selling spices, and it feels like stumbling into a tiny universe. Rows of clay jars sit in neat lines, each filled with something fragrant: cumin, coriander, pepper, cinnamon, saffron, and others you can't even name. The vendor lifts a jar toward you, inviting you to smell. You lean in, and the scent is warm and earthy, with hints of smoke and citrus. He nods approvingly, as if you've understood some unspoken message. For the first time, you feel less like a stranger and more like a participant in the quiet rituals of Roman daily life. Your journey through the market continues in slow, easy steps. A group of older women discuss prices with a kind of gentle fierceness, their voices rising and falling like waves. A man selling garlands of fresh flowers pauses to adjust a crown of violets on a little girl's head. A pair of travelers argue over directions, then laugh at their own confusion. Life is happening here in every corner, every breath, every movement, and you find yourself sinking into its rhythm. Eventually, you reach the center of the macellum, where a stone basin stands filled with clear water. People stop here to wash fruit, rinse hands, or simply cool their fingers for a moment. You dip your hand in. The water is cool, a small relief after the warm press of bodies and sounds around you. Droplets cling to your skin, catching the light before sliding away. You realize then that the market isn't just a place to buy food or goods.
It's where Rome breathes, where its people connect, where strangers become neighbors, even if only for a moment. And though the chaos may have intimidated you at first, there is a quiet beauty beneath the surface, a steady pulse that calms rather than overwhelms once you allow yourself to float with it. When you finally step back through the archway and out into the street, the city feels a little different. Larger, yes, and endlessly complex, but also familiar in a way you didn't expect. You've walked through the maze and found that it wasn't meant to trap you. It was meant to welcome you, to teach you how the Romans live, work, and thrive among one another. And though your day in the market is now complete, the scents linger warmly on your clothes, and the bustle still hums somewhere behind your ears. Steady, soothing, like distant waves fading as you drift onward. You leave the market with the faint taste of olives still lingering on your tongue, and the warm, dusty air seems softer now somehow, less threatening. The city no longer feels like a trap waiting to spring at any moment. Instead, it hums around you, alive but predictable, like a river with gentle eddies that you might just learn to navigate. Your feet carry you along cobbled streets, lined with buildings that lean ever so slightly as if Rome itself were shrugging under the weight of centuries. Ahead, a sudden clatter draws your attention, the rhythmic pounding of hooves on stone. Chariots? Possibly. Carts? Probably. You pause to let a wooden two-wheeled cart laden with clay amphorae roll past. The driver's face is tanned and lined, his hands steady on the reins despite the precarious load. Watching him, you think how odd it is that something so simple as a cart ride seems like an elegant performance in this city, with every movement carefully judged by gravity, by crowd, and by the gods of luck. You wander farther, and a small group of artisans catch your eye. One is hammering copper into thin sheets. Another carefully etches designs into clay. The air carries the tang of metal and smoke, and you notice the sharp contrast of their skill against the gentle chaos of the streets. These artisans have control in a city that feels overwhelmingly wild, a little oasis of precision and patience. You linger, watching, your attention almost hypnotized by the steady rhythm of hammering. One of the metal workers glances at you, smiles faintly, and goes back to work. In that tiny gesture, you feel an unspoken acknowledgement. Even in Rome, even for outsiders, there are small ways to belong. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind as you watch. Many Roman neighborhoods were home to specialized guilds and workshops, often passed down through families. Craftsmen like these were highly respected, and their work was crucial to the functioning of the city. A single misaligned amphora or botched metal clasp could ruin trade deals or frustrate an entire household. The precision required in their daily labor is astonishing and slightly terrifying, especially to someone whose modern hands have never been steady enough to hammer more than a nail. You keep moving, drawn by the gentle smell of something sweet, and soon find yourself at a stall selling dried fruits and honey cakes. The vendor waves you over, presenting an assortment with pride. A quirky fact pops into your mind. Romans often mixed dried fruits into bread or cakes as both a sweetener and a preservative. They even carried them as snacks on long journeys. You select a small piece of cake, the honey still sticky on your fingers, and take a bite. It's dense, sweet, and oddly grounding. For a moment, the chaos of the city feels distant. But just as quickly, reality intrudes. A loud shout comes from a nearby alley. Two boys are tussling over a bundle of rolled-up cloth. You step closer, curiosity outweighing caution, only to realize that one of the boys is about to crash into a pile of ceramic jars stacked carelessly on a corner stall. You react instinctively, stepping in and catching one of the jars before it can shatter. The boys scatter with shouts and laughter, leaving you holding a small, slightly cracked piece of pottery. The vendor eyes you warily, then nods, apparently satisfied that his wares survived. You tuck the jar under your arm, not because you need it, but because somehow carrying it feels like a small victory. Walking on, you notice a building with a low, arched doorway. Inside, a thin stream of cool air escapes, carrying the faint scent of water and stone. You step inside and find yourself in a small communal fountain area. Water trickles from carved stone spouts into shallow basins, the gentle sound soothing after the market's chaos. Romans often relied on such fountains for their daily water needs, a mainstream fact you remember from your reading, but you now experience it firsthand, dipping your hands into the cool liquid and letting it slide over your fingers. There's something profoundly calming about the way the water moves, how the sound carries, how it contrasts with the bustling streets outside. As you lean over the basin, watching the reflections ripple and distort, you notice a small carved inscription at the edge of the fountain. It's faded, but you make out a word repeated in several places: solace, safety, well-being, health. You smile faintly, realizing that even in this chaotic city, Romans made tiny spaces of care and calm, tucked into corners for anyone willing to notice. A subtle debate drifts into your thoughts. Historians still argue whether these communal fountains were purely practical, purely decorative, or a mix of both. Some believe they symbolized civic pride, while others argue they were strictly functional, designed to keep residents hydrated without moralizing about cleanliness. You decide that, in your current state of awe, it doesn't matter. For you, the fountain is both practical and calming, a small pocket of civilization in the bustling, sometimes overwhelming heartbeat of Rome. You linger, watching people approach to fill vessels, wash hands, or drink. A child drops a clay cup, and it shatters with a soft crack. The mother sighs, retrieves the pieces, and hands the child a replacement. Life continues, uninterrupted by minor misfortunes, which is oddly reassuring. It's a rhythm you begin to understand. Rome is relentless, yes, but it also flows around obstacles with patience and persistence. Feeling slightly rejuvenated, you step back into the street. The noise hits your ears again. The clatter of carts, the calls of merchants, the laughter of children. But now it feels more like a melody than a threat. You begin walking in the direction you think might lead to the city forum, or perhaps just somewhere that looks slightly less chaotic. Every turn brings new details: a street musician strumming a lyre, a young woman balancing a basket of bread on her head, a man sketching figures in a small notebook of sorts. Life unfolds in layers, and you feel yourself absorbing it, bit by bit, like a slow, steady lesson. A sudden shout nearby pulls you from your thoughts. A gladiator, or perhaps a trainee, is being led through the street for some kind of demonstration. The spectators watch eagerly, offering cheers and claps. You pause, fascinated but also acutely aware of your status. You are not a gladiator. You are not prepared for combat. You are someone trying to survive with modest skills and a tunic that's probably too clean for the neighborhood. And yet you feel the thrill of being so close to Rome's dangerous and dramatic world, observing without being a participant. As the crowd disperses, you notice a small alley leading away from the main street. The sounds are softer here, less organized, more unpredictable. But something about it draws you in. Perhaps it's the promise of discovery, or the simple desire to explore, to understand, to learn more about how this city functions. You take a deep breath and step into the alley, allowing yourself to drift with the rhythm of Rome, to follow curiosity instead of fear, to move forward into the unknown layers of the city. And as you walk, you remind yourself quietly, each step, each observation, each minor encounter is part of your survival. You are learning the subtle patterns of life in the Roman Empire.
where chaos meets order, where danger and delight exist side by side, and where one's wits, attention, and small acts of care make all the difference. Rome is teaching you, gently, relentlessly, and with a patient sense of humor. And though you are far from being a citizen, far from truly understanding everything, far from even knowing what awaits, you begin to realize you are beginning to belong. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to take the next step. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is enough for now. You move deeper into the quieter streets, letting the rhythm of the city settle around you like a soft, uneven blanket. The alleyways are narrower here, the sunlight filtered through layers of overhanging balconies and laundry lines. The air carries a mixture of scents: freshly baked bread from an unseen bakery, herbs drying on wooden racks, and the faint tang of the Tiber, reminding you how close the river is to everything in Rome. You slow your pace, aware that the calmer streets are deceptively alive, filled with subtle motion and the low hum of people going about their private routines. A sudden squeak of leather alerts you to a small group of men testing their new sandals. The sound is oddly musical, like a tiny percussion section punctuating the quiet hum of the neighborhood. One of them notices you pausing and gives a brief nod, almost as if acknowledging a fellow traveler, even though your appearance screams outsider. You nod back, grateful for the small human connection. In this city, gestures like this are as meaningful as coins, perhaps more so. Walking further, you notice a street corner where a handful of children are playing a game you don't recognize. They run around a circle drawn in the dirt, shouting and laughing, weaving between adults without consequence. The youngest trips over a stone and lands in a soft heap. A woman standing nearby pulls him up with gentle patience, fussing over his scraped knee while letting him immediately resume the game. You are reminded of a mainstream historical fact. Roman children often played outdoors in communal areas, practicing games that taught agility, strategy, and social interaction, even amidst the chaos of the city. The playfulness and resilience of these kids is quietly remarkable, a sharp contrast to the adult world's relentless pressures. As you continue, a small, weathered building catches your eye. Its stonework is cracked and uneven, but the doorway exudes a certain gravitas. Curious, you step closer and realize it is a small shrine dedicated to one of the lesser-known household gods, alleyways capitales, who watch over neighborhood crossroads. Inside, little offerings are placed: scraps of bread, coins, and a tiny ceramic figurine of a dog. You kneel briefly, though you have nothing to leave behind, and take a moment to appreciate the quiet reverence this small space offers. Even in a city bustling with chaos, Romans carved out pockets of calm and reflection, little sanctuaries where human concerns intersected with divine hope. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind as you linger by the shrine. Some Romans believed that if you placed bread or small coins at these neighborhood shrines, it could protect your home from both theft and fire. You cannot help but smile at the irony, considering your recent encounter with the bathhouse thieves. Perhaps you should have left an offering somewhere before venturing into the city. Historians still argue whether these practices were largely symbolic or genuinely believed to have protective power, but in the quiet of this alley, it feels comforting enough to matter. You step back into the street and notice a small stall selling tools and household items. Knives, clay jars, wooden spoons, and other necessities are laid out on a simple wooden table. The vendor, an older man with a faintly crooked smile, watches as you linger, offering a wordless nod of encouragement. You pick up a small clay cup and turn it over in your hands, noting its imperfections. It is functional, yes, but handmade, with the faint fingerprints of its creator still visible in the clay.
You set it back down gently, appreciating the human touch behind every item. Nearby, a group of women gather to discuss the day's events, pointing occasionally to the street or to passersby. Their voices rise and fall in a steady rhythm, and you realize that this is the social fabric of Rome as much as any marketplace or bathhouse. The conversation is punctuated with laughter, the occasional scolding, and bursts of gossip, yet it flows seamlessly into the background, a constant, comforting hum of life. You observe quietly, noting the way people interact, how gestures and expressions carry meaning, and how the city itself orchestrates a delicate balance of privacy and communal awareness. As you continue, a faint clattering draws your attention to a nearby workshop. Inside, a craftsman is carving intricate designs into wooden furniture. His hands move with deliberate precision, hammer and chisel working in perfect rhythm. You watch, mesmerized, as a block of rough wood transforms under his care into something elegant and purposeful. This reminds you of another mainstream historical fact. Roman craftsmen were highly skilled, often training for years in specialized trades. The patience, focus, and mastery displayed here are astounding, a testament to human ingenuity that persists despite the noisy, chaotic environment outside. You move on, stepping lightly over puddles and uneven stones. A dog crosses your path, tail wagging, then disappears around a corner. Children chase each other nearby, their laughter echoing faintly against the stone walls. The air carries a faint whiff of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor, mingling with the earthy scent of stone and dust. You breathe deeply, letting the sensory tapestry of Rome settle into your mind. The sun has shifted slightly, casting long shadows that stretch across the cobblestones. You pause at an intersection, considering your next move. The streets here feel calmer, yet you know that danger or misfortune could appear without warning. A loose tile on a roof might fall, a cart might come careening down an alley, or a pickpocket might emerge from a shadow. You remain alert, but not anxious. You are learning the rhythms of the city, the subtle cues that guide movement and survival, the unspoken rules that keep chaos manageable. And as you take another slow step forward, you feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. Each encounter, each observation, each minor interaction builds your understanding of life in ancient Rome. You are far from fully equipped to navigate this city without mishap, but the knowledge you are gathering, the attentiveness you are cultivating, is a form of armor in itself. Even in the unpredictable, bustling streets, there are lessons to be absorbed, routines to be learned, and moments of calm to be discovered. As you continue down the winding street, you notice a small fountain tucked into a corner. The water trickles gently over worn stone, and you pause to let the sound wash over you. People come and go, dipping hands or washing fruit, their movements graceful and unhurried. You lean close, watching the reflections ripple in the water, and for the first time in the city, you feel a deep sense of connection, not just to the people around you, but to the enduring pulse of Rome itself. The city is alive, chaotic, challenging, and relentless, yet within it are pockets of patience, creativity, and quiet order. And as you step away from the fountain, the warm sunlight hitting your face, the distant calls of merchants, the soft clatter of feet on stone, you realize something profound. You are not just surviving in Rome, you are learning to move with it, to observe without being overwhelmed, to find small moments of calm amid the bustle. The city has begun to reveal its rhythm to you, gentle and insistent, teaching you that even in the most chaotic environment, there are spaces for reflection, observation, and quiet understanding. With a slow, deliberate breath, you continue down the street, carrying the subtle reassurance that you are gradually becoming attuned to the heartbeat of the city. And while Rome may still test you at every turn, each small lesson, each encounter, and each sensory detail brings you closer to a delicate balance between vigilance and calm, chaos and comprehension, survival and adaptation. You step out of the alleyway, letting the sunlight wash over your shoulders. The air is warmer here, carrying the mingling aromas of fresh bread, dusted stone, and distant river water. The city feels quieter, though not entirely. Even in these streets, Rome hums with life. The subtle rhythms of daily routine, the soft murmur of conversations, the faint clatter of carts and animals navigating the uneven cobblestones. You take a slow, measured breath, letting the sounds and smells settle around you like a gentle tide. Ahead, you see a small plaza opening between buildings, an informal gathering place for neighbors. People are engaged in myriad activities. A man sharpens a knife, children chase a hoop along the edge of the stones, women exchange baskets of goods, and a dog naps under a low bench, occasionally twitching its ears in response to nearby sounds. The space feels intimate and lived in, a microcosm of the city's larger pulse. You step carefully onto the square, mindful of the uneven stones beneath your feet. A vendor calls out from a shaded stall, offering dried figs and honey cakes. You pause, momentarily tempted, but remember your dwindling coin supply. You nod politely and continue, feeling oddly satisfied with the small act of restraint. Another quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Romans sometimes sweetened their bread with pine resin or herbs, a flavor that might seem unusual to modern taste buds. You imagine a loaf infused with rosemary or thyme, warm from a wood-fired oven, and smile faintly. Historians still argue whether these additions were culinary experiments or simply methods of preservation, but the creativity is charming either way. A sudden shout diverts your attention. A young boy has dropped a basket of vegetables, and they scatter across the square. He scrambles to gather them, aided by a woman who steadies him with gentle patience. The scene is mundane, almost humorous, but you can't help noticing how communal the response is. Strangers offer help, hands reach out instinctively, and the boy's embarrassment is softened by shared human kindness. You remind yourself, survival in Rome often depended not only on skill and caution, but also on awareness and integration into these social currents. Turning a corner, you find yourself in a quieter lane lined with small workshops. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and wet clay. You pause before a potter's wheel, watching as a craftsman shapes a lump of clay into a simple, functional bowl. The wheel spins slowly, guided by calloused fingers, and you are mesmerized by the transformation. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Pottery was an essential craft in Rome, used in homes, markets, and religious rituals alike. The quality of clay, the shaping technique, and even the firing process could significantly affect daily life. Watching this man work, you feel a quiet respect for the patience and skill embedded in even the simplest objects. Nearby, a small blacksmith's forge glows with warmth. Sparks fly as metal meets hammer, and the rhythmic pounding forms a hypnotic pattern. You lean closer, aware of the heat on your skin, and notice how the blacksmith coordinates his movements, balancing precision and strength. A quirky detail surfaces. Some Roman smiths were rumored to whistle while hammering, believing it improved the flow of the metal. Whether true or folklore, the notion brings a small smile. Historians still argue whether these smithing rituals held practical benefit or were purely symbolic, but the charm of imagination endures. You continue along the lane, noticing children peering curiously from windows and elderly men sitting on low stools, discussing events in subdued voices. The intimacy of this neighborhood contrasts sharply with the bustling market you navigated earlier. Here, life moves at a slower, gentler pace. You step lightly, mindful not to disrupt the delicate rhythm of daily routines. Even the pigeons coo softly from roof ledges, a subtle accompaniment to the hum of human activity. As you reach the end of the lane, you find a small square dominated by a fountain. Water trickles from a stone spout into a shallow basin, and the sound is soothing, cutting through the faint chaos lingering in your ears. People pause here to wash hands, rinse vegetables, or simply enjoy a moment of respite. You approach the fountain, dipping your hands into the cool water. The sensation is grounding, a reminder of the steady necessities of life amidst the unpredictability of the city. You take a slow sip from the basin, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the small gathering. A woman nods briefly in acknowledgement, her hands wet from washing herbs. Children tiptoe near the edge, testing the water with small fingers. Life continues around you, unhurried yet purposeful. You notice how the Romans have layered functionality, ritual, and communal connection into even simple elements like a fountain. It is a subtle lesson in patience, observation, and the interdependence of daily life. Feeling renewed, you step back from the fountain and survey the square. A man is arranging small clay figurines for sale, while a dog curls up near his feet. The smells of herbs, baked bread, and sun-warmed stone mingle in the air. You move toward a narrow street leading from the square, aware that the city still holds endless discoveries, lessons, and challenges. Each step you take reinforces a subtle understanding. Rome is a city of contrasts, chaos and order, noise and quiet, danger and comfort. And navigating it requires both vigilance and openness. As you continue walking, the alley narrows, shadows lengthen, and the day begins its slow descent toward evening. You feel the rhythm of the city embedding itself in your awareness, the predictable irregularity of movement, the harmony of sound and smell, the quiet persistence of daily routines. Each encounter, each observation, each small act of interaction builds your sense of belonging, however tenuous. And as the sun dips lower, painting the stone walls with soft gold, you realize that the lessons of Rome are subtle, patient, and quietly persistent. By the time you emerge into a slightly wider street, you are aware of the growing sense of rhythm, of pulse, of continuity. The city no longer feels entirely foreign. You notice the interplay of shadow and light, the way voices overlap without colliding, the steady flow of movement that somehow manages to balance chaos and order. You take a deep breath, savoring the moment. Rome is relentless, challenging, and unpredictable, but it is also a teacher, a guide, and, in its own way, a companion. Even here, far from markets, bathhouses, or shrines, the lessons linger: patience, observation, integration, humility, and attention to the subtle patterns of life. You are still learning, still navigating, still vulnerable, but you are also slowly attuned to the heartbeat of the city. And as you continue forward, the quiet, persistent hum of Rome wraps around you, guiding, teaching, and, unexpectedly, comforting. The streets begin to shift around you, narrowing and rising gently, the sunlight slanting in golden beams through gaps between buildings. You notice how the sound of the city changes too. The clatter of carts, the laughter of children, and the shouts of vendors grow softer, more distant, as if Rome itself is exhaling. You take a slow, deliberate step forward, allowing the warmth of the stone beneath your sandals and the soft breeze brushing your face to sink into your awareness. This part of the city is quieter, yet there is a subtle vitality that hums just beneath the surface.
As you walk, you notice a small group of men seated around a low table, playing a game with knuckle bones and dice. Their laughter rises and falls in rhythmic waves, and for a moment you pause to watch, feeling like an observer of a world that is entirely foreign yet strangely familiar. The game is simple in concept, but requires quick thinking, skill, and a degree of luck. You realize that games like this served not just for entertainment, but as social exercises in strategy, negotiation, and patience. A mainstream historical fact that illustrates the interplay of leisure and learning in Roman life. Watching the dice tumble and the subtle gestures that accompany each move, you sense a rhythm in the human interactions that echoes the broader rhythm of the city itself. A curious sight draws your attention next, a vendor selling small animal figurines carved from bone, ivory, and clay. The pieces are detailed, delicate, and surprisingly expressive. Some depict horses, others dogs, and a few even strange creatures that seem imaginary. You pick one up, a tiny bird, carved so finely that the feathers are almost visible, and turn it over in your hand. A quirky thought surfaces. Romans sometimes used these small figures as tokens in games, or as charms for protection, believing that they could carry small blessings or luck into one's home. Historians still argue whether the use of such objects was primarily symbolic, playful, or both, but you can appreciate the artistry and intent, the small bridge between human creativity and superstition. Further down the street, a faint smell of smoke draws your gaze toward a small bakery tucked into a corner. The door is open, and you can see the baker carefully shaping loaves of bread, sliding them into a wood-fired oven and checking their progress with a practiced eye. The smell of freshly baked bread is intoxicating, warm and slightly sweet, mingling with the earthy aroma of stone and dust. You pause, breathing deeply, aware that even in a city as chaotic as Rome, these small acts of preparation, care, and attention to detail create pockets of comfort and reliability. Nearby, a young woman carries a basket of eggs and dried herbs, balancing it with practiced ease as she navigates the narrow street. She passes a man sharpening a knife at a whetstone. Sparks fly, a small flash of gold in the morning light. The contrast of motion and stillness, of sound and quiet, of danger and mundane necessity strikes you with a gentle intensity. This is life in Rome, not a spectacle, not a storybook narrative, but a careful, ongoing choreography of survival, resourcefulness, and adaptation. You step lightly, mindful of the uneven stones, as a small dog darts past your feet. Its tail wags, ears pricked, eyes bright with curiosity. The dog stops to sniff at a puddle, and you can't help but smile. Even in a city as massive and potentially overwhelming as Rome, small creatures move with purpose, contributing to the living tapestry of life around you. You realize that being attuned to these small movements, these subtle cues, can provide both amusement and practical awareness, knowing where to step, whom to avoid, and when to pause. A little further along, you notice a narrow flight of stone steps leading upward between two buildings. The steps are worn, the edges rounded smooth by countless feet over decades, possibly centuries. You begin to ascend slowly, aware that each step carries you further from the main thoroughfares and deeper into the layered structure of the city. From here, you can glimpse rooftops, terraces, and glimpses of gardens tucked into tight courtyards. The higher vantage point offers perspective, literally and figuratively, on the complexity of urban life. As you pause halfway up, a soft murmur catches your attention. It comes from a small terrace where a woman is pouring water into clay vessels, humming quietly. Children gather around, laughing softly, while a cat stretches lazily in the sun. This domestic scene contrasts with the energetic chaos of the streets below, yet it feels inseparable from it. Life in Rome exists simultaneously on multiple planes, blending noise and silence, danger and comfort, public spectacle and private routine. You take a deep breath, absorbing the sight and sound, realizing that understanding the city requires both observation and patience. At the top of the steps, you find a narrow walkway leading along the edges of the buildings. From here, the city stretches outward like a patchwork quilt. Rooftops, terraces, occasional glimpses of the Tiber, and streets winding into intricate patterns. The sun casts long shadows, bathing the city in a soft, warm glow. You step lightly, aware that each movement matters in a space so tight and elevated, and allow yourself a quiet sense of accomplishment. You have navigated the maze of streets, alleys, and small squares, and now the city unfolds before you, intricate and alive. A sudden flurry of movement draws your gaze downward. A group of merchants are arranging baskets of produce, calling to each other in a soft chorus. Children chase one another, laughing, their voices rising above the subtle clinking of metal tools and distant hooves. You notice how each person seems to occupy a rhythm of their own, yet these individual rhythms coexist harmoniously, creating a larger, living symphony of the city. The observation brings a quiet sense of connection, as if the city itself has begun to accept you, however tentatively, into its rhythm. You continue along the walkway, noticing a small shrine tucked into the corner of a building. Offerings of breadcrumbs, coins, and tiny figurines lie in the niche. The shrine is simple but significant, a reminder that even in a bustling urban environment, spiritual life and personal devotion weave quietly through the daily routines of its inhabitants. You kneel briefly, placing your hand over the offerings, and feel an odd sense of reassurance. In a city as vast and unpredictable as Rome, these small pockets of ritual provide structure, continuity, and calm. Descending back into the streets, you are greeted by the familiar, comforting hum of the city's lower layers. The clatter of carts, the voices of vendors, and the occasional bray of a mule. You move slowly, savoring each sound, each movement, each subtle shift in the environment. Life in Rome is layered, complex, and continuous. Danger, chaos, routine, and ritual coexist seamlessly, and you are learning to navigate them not with force or fear, but with attentiveness, patience, and curiosity. By the time you reach a small square at the junction of several streets, the sun has begun its gentle descent. The light softens, casting the city in warm tones and stretching long shadows across the cobblestones. You pause, taking in the scene. Children playing, vendors packing up, neighbors exchanging news and goods, and the faint murmur of the Tiber in the distance. Rome feels less like an overwhelming labyrinth and more like a living organism, a city that breathes, observes, and continues with or without your comprehension. And as you stand there, the warmth of the day fading, the gentle sounds of life surrounding you, and the subtle movements of the city threading together into a cohesive rhythm, you feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. You are not merely surviving in Rome, you are participating in its intricate dance. You are learning its language of movement, sound, smell, and observation. And though challenges remain, you are gradually attuned to its pulse, slowly discovering how to exist and even thrive within its vibrant, relentless rhythm. The evening light softens the edges of the city, bathing the stone streets and clay rooftops in a gentle amber glow. You continue to move through the winding lanes, feeling the day's warmth slowly fade from your skin. The distant hum of carts, children, and merchants begins to quiet, replaced by subtler sounds. The whisper of wind through narrow alleys, the faint trickle of water from fountains, and the occasional cooing of pigeons perched on sun-warmed ledges. The city seems to exhale, its rhythm slowing, inviting reflection after a long, bustling day.
You notice a group of women carrying woven baskets along a side street. Their movements are graceful and synchronized, almost choreographed, as they navigate uneven stones and the occasional stray dog. The soft jangle of coins and trinkets hidden in the baskets blends with the distant murmurs of conversation, creating a gentle melody that drifts along the street. One of the women glances at you, her expression curious but welcoming. You nod and continue, realizing that even small gestures in Rome convey trust, recognition, or warning. You are learning these subtleties as part of survival, and the lessons are slowly imprinting themselves in your mind. Turning a corner, the aroma of roasting chestnuts reaches you. A vendor has lit a small brazier, and the smoke curls into the evening sky. You pause, savoring the scent and imagining the warmth of the chestnuts in your hand. A quirky detail flits through your thoughts. Romans often roasted chestnuts over open flames, and sometimes added honey or spices, creating a snack both comforting and nourishing. Historians still argue whether chestnuts were more common among the wealthy or were an essential food for poorer citizens. But for you, the smell alone is grounding, offering a tangible connection to the city's daily life. You continue walking, passing a narrow alley where children are playing quietly with small wooden toys. Their laughter is subdued now, soft and melodic, a gentle punctuation to the city's overall rhythm. You notice an elderly man leaning against a doorway, observing the children with a faint smile. He rocks slightly on his heels, hands tucked into his tunic, and you feel a quiet sense of continuity. Generations of Romans moving through space, performing familiar rituals, and weaving together the fabric of communal life. This subtle layer of observation reminds you that survival is not just about avoiding danger. It is about learning patterns, reading signals, and understanding how people inhabit their world. Ahead, a small courtyard opens before you, partially hidden behind a low stone wall. Inside, a fountain trickles quietly, surrounded by terracotta pots with herbs and flowers. A woman washes vegetables, her movements slow and deliberate, while a child chases a small cat around her feet. The sound of water, the muted chatter, and the soft slap of bare feet on stone create a lullaby-like rhythm. You pause, letting your senses soak in the scene, noting the small details, the shine of wet leaves, the faint dust on sunlit stone, the gentle sway of laundry overhead. Even the minor imperfections, the cracked tiles, chipped pots, or uneven stone, add to the texture, grounding the scene in lived reality. A craftsman's workshop opens onto the courtyard, and you see the flicker of a candle inside. Shadows dance across the walls, and the faint scent of smoldering oil or resin drifts outward. The craftsman is shaping leather with careful precision, his hands moving with practiced ease. A mainstream historical fact occurs to you. Roman artisans often specialized in a single trade, devoting years to perfecting their craft, passing down knowledge through apprenticeships. Observing this man's focus, you understand the patience required, the discipline necessary to survive and even thrive in the city. You notice a small shrine tucked into the corner of the courtyard. Little offerings, breadcrumbs, coins, and tiny figurines sit in quiet repose. The shrine radiates a soft sense of continuity, a reminder that amidst the chaos of city life, Romans carved out spaces for reflection and devotion. You kneel briefly, placing your hand over the offerings, and feel a faint connection, as though the centuries between you and this ritual compress into a single, calming moment. Historians still argue whether such domestic shrines were primarily symbolic or actively invoked for protection. But in the quiet of the courtyard, the intent feels more real than debate. You step back into the lane, noticing how shadows have lengthened and merged, creating soft shapes along the uneven cobbles. The day's energy has settled into a slower, more deliberate rhythm.
Carts move cautiously, conversations are hushed, and even the animals tread lightly. The city has shifted subtly, revealing another layer of its personality, a quiet, introspective Rome that balances the chaos of daylight with the calm of approaching evening. A faint melody drifts from an open window, a lyre plucked gently by a resident or student of music. The notes weave through the street, touching everything lightly, blending with the distant trickle of water and the soft cooing of pigeons. You pause, letting the music guide your steps, noting how even in a city teeming with life, moments of calm and artistry exist in harmony with the everyday rhythm. Walking further, you reach a narrow bridge spanning a small canal that feeds into the Tiber. Water laps softly against the stone, reflecting the muted gold of the evening sky. A few fishermen are gathered at the edge, their nets coiled carefully, talking quietly as they prepare for the night. The gentle lapping of water, the faint call of birds returning to roost, and the soft voices of the fishermen create a lull in the city's overall rhythm, a space for pause and quiet observation. You linger on the bridge, feeling the smooth stone beneath your hands, the subtle movement of water underfoot, and the whisper of wind across your face. Life continues around you, residents moving toward their homes, vendors securing stalls, children being called inside. But here, the pulse of the city feels gentler, more forgiving, almost meditative. You sense a fragile balance. Rome is still vibrant, still relentless, but you are learning to move in step with its quieter moments. As dusk deepens, you descend from the bridge and wander along the riverbank, the soft sound of flowing water mingling with distant city noises. The city has shifted into a softer cadence. Carts creak less, voices lower, and shadows grow long. The subtle interplay of light and movement, of sound and stillness, reveals a rhythm that is as much internal as external, a pattern you begin to sense and even anticipate. You realize that survival here is not simply a matter of navigating physical hazards. It is also about attuning yourself to temporal patterns, understanding when to move, when to pause, and when to observe quietly. The air carries a faint scent of evening herbs, roasted bread, and warm stone, blending into a perfume that is uniquely Roman. You breathe deeply, letting the calm seep into your muscles, your mind, your awareness. You are aware of every small sound, the soft flap of a bird's wing, the distant laughter of children, the subtle scrape of a cart on stone, and notice how each element fits seamlessly into the broader texture of life. And as you continue along the riverbank, the sun finally dipping below the horizon, you feel a quiet, reflective sense of connection. Rome has revealed itself not only through chaos and bustle, but also through these softer, deliberate moments. The city is teaching you patience, observation, subtlety, and adaptation. You are learning to navigate not just physical space, but temporal and social rhythms as well, moving gently through layers of history that are alive in the present. Night falls gently over the city, folding shadows across the streets, terraces, and courtyards. The warm glow of the remaining sunlight fades into soft amber and muted violet hues, painting the stone and clay with a quiet serenity. You walk slowly, letting the city's rhythm guide your steps. The noises of the day, the clatter of carts, the chatter of merchants, the laughter of children, have softened into a distant murmur, replaced by subtler sounds. The gentle flow of the Tiber, the faint rustle of leaves in narrow alleys, and the occasional coo of a pigeon perched above. Rome, relentless in its chaos by day, has revealed a more contemplative, tender side, one that rewards careful attention. You move through streets now largely emptied of passers-by, each step echoing softly against the worn cobblestones.
A faint aroma of roasting bread still lingers, mingling with the earthy scent of river mud and the faint trace of herbs drying in small terraces. You pause at a corner where the faint glow of a lamp flickers, casting elongated shadows across a narrow alley. The soft, rhythmic flicker seems almost alive, guiding your gaze toward a small courtyard just beyond. In the courtyard, a solitary fountain dribbles water into a stone basin, the sound gentle and soothing. You approach, dipping your hands into the cool liquid, letting the sensation ground you after a long day of walking, observing, and learning. A subtle movement catches your eye. A cat stretches lazily along the edge of the fountain, tail curling in a perfect semicircle. Nearby, a child rests against a low wall, half asleep, murmuring softly to a small toy. Even in this quiet, small human dramas unfold, delicate threads of life that continue regardless of your presence. The serenity of the scene reminds you of a mainstream historical fact. Roman homes and neighborhoods often incorporated such communal spaces. Small fountains, open courtyards, shaded terraces, not only for utility, but as areas for social interaction and reflection. These spaces offered respite from the city's relentless pulse, fostering community while nurturing individual peace. You lean against a low stone wall and let your gaze drift upward. The stars begin to appear, twinkling faintly above the city. In this half-light, the rooftops seem softer, less imposing, almost friendly. The air cools, brushing your skin with a gentle caress, carrying whispers of the river and the faint aroma of night-blooming flowers. A quirky fact comes to mind. Some Romans believed that certain plants, like rue or lavender, could ward off bad dreams or evil spirits if placed near sleeping quarters. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were widespread superstition or limited to small cultural practices, but the idea of protection and comfort resonates now as you wander through the night. The streets are quiet, but life persists in subtle ways. A lone baker tends the final loaves of the day, their golden crusts glowing faintly in the warm light of a single lamp. A dog moves silently, patrolling its familiar territory. Windows above glow dimly, revealing hints of domestic life. A family sharing a quiet meal, a scholar poring over scrolls by candlelight, a woman arranging herbs near a small shrine. The city is alive, yet it breathes gently now, and you move with it, aware that survival in Rome requires more than caution. It requires attunement to the ebb and flow of life, noticing not only threats, but also quiet moments of continuity, care, and subtle beauty. As you wander toward a quiet bridge spanning a tributary of the Tiber, you take a moment to pause, watching the water shimmer in the soft moonlight. The reflection ripples gently with the faint movement of night air. You are reminded that the river, so vital to the life of the city, continues its course uninterrupted, carrying commerce, stories, and daily necessities alike. A mainstream fact surfaces. The Tiber was both a lifeline and a challenge, providing water, trade routes, and fertile banks while posing the constant risk of flooding. Historians still debate whether its strategic importance outweighed the occasional dangers it presented, but for now, you appreciate its serene presence in the night. Moving along the riverbank, your senses attune to the subtle sounds, the soft slap of water against stone, the occasional call of a nightbird, the gentle rustle of reeds. Each step, each breath, each sound is a meditation. The chaotic energy of daylight has faded, leaving a quiet canvas on which you can reflect on the lessons learned. Observation, patience, attentiveness, and the delicate balance of social interaction, survival, and personal adaptation. Even the smallest choices, a step here, a pause there, a respectful nod to a passerby, have consequences in this living, breathing city, teaching you how to exist without demanding dominion. Ahead, a small square opens, bathed in the soft glow of lanterns. Shadows dance across low stone benches and the rough edges of cobblestones. A few residents linger, speaking in quiet tones, finishing their tasks for the day. Children long since returned indoors, and the occasional figure passes quickly through, aware of the lingering stillness. You notice a small shrine tucked into a corner, the offerings there catching the faint light. You pause, imagining the prayers and intentions whispered here over countless years. Even in a city as expansive and overwhelming as Rome, these intimate rituals persist, offering structure, continuity, and reassurance. As you step away from the square, you find yourself reflecting on the day's journey. You have navigated alleys, markets, fountains, and courtyards. You have observed artisans at work, children at play, and citizens going about their daily routines. You have felt both the pulse of chaos and the calm of quiet spaces, learning to move with the city rather than against it. You are more aware now of the subtle patterns, rhythms, and interactions that shape life in the Roman Empire. Each observation has been a small lesson in survival, adaptation, and understanding. And now, as the city's night deepens, you feel a gentle sense of closure. The bustling, relentless energy of Rome has softened into a calm, persistent hum. The lessons of the day, the fleeting moments of connection, and the quiet observations coalesce into a sense of balance. You are far from perfect at navigating this ancient city, but you have learned the rhythms, discovered pockets of calm, and glimpsed the intricate choreography of life that unfolds within its stone and clay walls. The air cools further as you make your way to a quiet terrace overlooking the river. The water reflects the moonlight, the soft flicker of distant lanterns, and the subtle movements of night creatures. You breathe deeply, feeling the cumulative calm of the day settling into your body. Rome has been relentless, chaotic, and challenging, but it has also been patient, instructive, and quietly generous in revealing its patterns. You sense that survival here is less about domination and more about harmony, moving with, observing carefully, and finding your place in the subtle currents of city life. You sit on the edge of the terrace, letting your legs dangle and your hands rest lightly on the stone. The city stretches before you, both alive and subdued, a living tapestry of human activity, architectural resilience, and layered history. You take a final deep breath, exhaling slowly, allowing the calm, persistent rhythm of Rome to imprint itself on your awareness. You are not merely a visitor. You are a participant in its quiet, enduring pulse, attuned to both its challenges and its moments of delicate beauty. As the night deepens, the city's rhythms slow even further. The distant sounds of carts, laughter, and bustling streets fade almost entirely, leaving only the gentle hum of water, the soft rustle of leaves, and the occasional coo of a pigeon. The stone beneath your fingers is cool, the air soft against your skin, and your breathing gradually aligns with the calm pulse of the city. You feel a subtle warmth, a sense of safety, and a quiet satisfaction in the small discoveries, the lessons learned, and the moments observed. The images of bustling markets, sunlit courtyards, artisans at work, and children playing drift softly through your mind, now muted and gentle, like distant memories from another day. The lessons of patience, observation, and attentiveness sink in slowly, imprinting themselves without force, encouraging a gentle reflection on how life, even in a city as overwhelming as Rome, is navigable when approached with care and awareness. You allow your thoughts to soften, noticing the patterns, rhythms, and quiet harmonies that have unfolded around you, letting each one settle into a peaceful cadence. With a final glance at the moonlit river and the softly flickering lanterns, you feel a gentle closure, a reassurance that the city continues its life with or without your presence. Rome is vast, intricate and endlessly alive, yet you have found moments of calm, pockets of observation, and spaces of quiet understanding. You are ready to rest, carrying with you the gentle lessons and soothing pulse of the city, allowing your mind and body to drift into a soft, reflective calm. Sweet dreams!